What if the scariest PlayStation horror games were the ones you were never meant to play? Long before the typical jump scares of mainstream horror, in Japan, they were quietly crafting nightmares that blurred the line between game and ghost story. These weren't just games, they were psychological experiments hidden on the shelves of late 90s game stores that are now lost in time, untranslated and largely forgotten. But tonight, we're digging them up. By the end of this video, you will know which of these rare point-and-click titles is still the most terrifying, and why preserving them might be the only way to keep their stories alive. Before survival horror had a name, there was Clock Tower: The First Fear. Originally released for the Super Famicom and later ported to the PlayStation, this game set the foundation for every horror adventure that followed. You would play as Jennifer Simpson, a young orphan trapped inside of a gothic mansion, stalked by a relentless killer known as the Scissorman. What made Clock Tower terrifying wasn't just the chase, it was the helplessness. You couldn't fight back, you could only run, hide and pray. The game's slow pacing and dreaded atmosphere, with the background and creepy sound effects, gave players a constant sense of dread. This was tension through design, not through action. It was the perfect place to begin the descent into the PlayStation's forgotten nightmares. You would have to be aware of your surroundings, which you could use to your advantage, or they could put up a roadblock, leading to the inevitable, as the emphasis on the adventure was to run, hide and survive at all costs, while trying to escape the madness. It is one of the most well-renowned survival horror classics that really set the stage for everything to come after. So much in a way that the game has gotten a re-release on modern systems over the last while, to relive that first fear all over again, which also leads into it being the perfect place to begin the descent into the PlayStation's forgotten nightmares. Darkseed is a point-and-click horror adventure, famous for its disturbing visuals designed by legendary biomechanical artist H.R. Giger. This PS1 version is a port of the original PC game, with added voice acting and video sequences. You play as Mike Dawson, an advertising copywriter who recently purchased a seemingly ordinary Victorian mansion in a small town of Woodland Hills. On his first night in the house, Mike experiences a horrific nightmare, where alien creatures implant something into his brain. When he awakens, he is met with a pounding headache and not sure of its actual cause. But as you dive further into the story, you realise that he only has 3 days before the seed transforms him into a host for another worldly entity. As Mike desperately searches for answers, he uncovers a parallel dark world existing alongside our own reality, a biomechanical nightmare realm that is used to serve an occult reference with interdimensional contacts. An alien race called the Ancients who are using Earth as a staging ground for invasion, and the Darkseed will birth a hybrid creature that will help facilitate humanity's conquest. As you explore your way through the game, you'll find yourself having to solve puzzles and explore many of the game's unique and atmospheric environments, where you'll traverse between the normal world and the dark world, which is a horrifying alien dimension where organic and mechanical elements fuse into deeply unsettling landscapes. Rooms mirror each other across dimensions, but the dark world reveals the true nightmarish nature of reality. But what Darkseed really does is it emphasises the narrative of cosmic horror and body invasion. As Mike is already infected, but already violated. The question isn't if something terrible will happen, but whether he can prevent his own monstrous rebirth before time runs out, which presents itself essentially as a claustrophobic nightmare that still remains to this day as one of gaming's most visually disturbing experiences, and was very graphic for its time when it released. And these elements would bring about a new layer of immersion through eerie sound design and subtle animation, and its time-based progression meant that every mistake, every hesitation could lead to failure, which few games have ever captured, making it a suffocating sense of cosmic dread.
It's a calm neighborhood out here. My house seems somehow out of time, a relic of a dark past, or perhaps a dark future. My head feels like it's going to explode. These nightmares have given me a mean headache. It seems like I've had this headache since I moved in. The road seems strangely empty and unoccupied. Boy, my head hurts. Here's an entry to an old cemetery, overgrown with weeds. This place looks like no one has been around to tend it for a long time. This place looks like no one has been around to tend it for a long time. My head feels like it's going to explode. These are ancient symbols covering this mausoleum. But I'm not up on my Egyptian. The tomb door won't open. These nightmares have given me a mean headache. My head is killing me. The road seems strangely empty and unoccupied. My head feels like it's going to explode. This town looks unnaturally quiet. I can't go in there without showering first. These nightmares have given me a mean headache. I can't go in there without showering first. It seems like I've had this headache since I moved in. Boy, my head hurts. Maybe I should call for an appointment first. My head is killing me. An old library. A venerable repository of knowledge. It guards its bounty behind a handsomely decorated structure. My head feels like it's going to explode. I can't go in there without showering first.
The Twilight Syndrome series represents the pinnacle of Japan's high school urban legend horror on the PlayStation, with the first game, Tansaku, following a group of students investigating paranormal rumours within a high school. The horror-themed adventure experience that unfolds will see you playing as a group of young high school students, investigating urban legends and paranormal events, which will feature multiple endings based on your choices, that will unfold throughout the gameplay based on dialogue choices and exploration elements, where you'll witness many static backgrounds and subtle sound design cues that perfectly capture the whispering feeling of ghost stories long after class. It features pseudo 3D graphics and realistic 3D sound effects to enhance the horror atmosphere within, and as you control the characters throughout each of the various environments, such as schools and neighbourhoods, you can't help but feel the claustrophobic elements that'll set in. But what's notable about this game is that it presented a massive influence on the horror genre in video games, especially in Japan, and a lot of the point and click elements and games that we see now today have all been influenced by this legendary series. As for its time, it was recognised highly for its unique storytelling and immersive sound design, which dives and delves into interactive folklore, presenting an element of fear that's born from suggestion, not spectacle.
Mite.
Darkseed 2 expanded on the horror from the original game, both thematically and psychologically, reprising the role of the character Mike Dawson that is traumatised from the events of the first game who returns home, but quickly learning that reality and delusion begin to blur. After time has passed and struggling with PTSD, unemployment, and being dismissed as insane, hoping for a fresh start, he moves in with his mother, but the dark world hasn't forgotten him. Not long after his arrival, one of his childhood friends, Jack, is brutally murdered, and Mike becomes the prime suspect due to his history of delusions. The Ancients, the alien race in the first game, are still plotting to invade Earth, and Mike discovers that the Darkseed may have left a permanent change on his brain. But as he races to clear his name, he also uncovers a deeper conspiracy involving the town's founding families and their occult connections to the dark world, where they were performing ancient rituals and are secretly collaborating with the Ancients, which unveils the true scope of the interdimensional invasion plan. But unlike the first game's narrative, which focused on isolation, you find yourself in a hostile small town where everyone suspects him of murder. The horror is both supernatural and social, where you must navigate police interrogations, suspicious locals, and his own mother's doubts while fighting interdimensional horrors. The parallel reality mechanics expands the experience, which constantly shift between the normal world and the dark world once again, with the actions in one greatly affecting what can happen increasingly in the other, in very disturbing ways. But every choice has a consequence, like in the original game, as it operates on a very strict timeline, spanning multiple days. If you miss appointments, fail to gather evidence, or arrive late to key events, it will have an impact on the overall story and the endings that precede it. But like the first game, it is also a paranoid thriller where social prosecution and alien invasion become indistinguishable nightmares.
ポール・クーパーだ。日曜大工の店のオーナーにしては家はいい状態じゃないな。芝生はいいけどね。ハンクズダイナーは昔みたいな流行りの場じゃなくなった。けどハンクはまだそこそこ儲けているんだな。どの曲も25セントも払う価値はない。昔ほど音楽に興味がなくなったみたいだ。
Known internationally simply as Clock Tower, this PlayStation sequel pushed fear to cinematic levels. Once again you find yourself taking on the role of Jennifer Simpson, the main survivor of the original entry, that takes place a while after escaping the original massacre. Jennifer is adopted by a new family and is brought to their home, but as she tries to rebuild her life, the trauma of her past still follows her. She is plagued by nightmares and undergoing psychiatric evaluation. When a new series of brutal murders begin, Jennifer finds herself hunted once again by the Scissor Man, but as she investigates she uncovers dark secrets, not only of the family's connection to demonic entities, but also that of occult worshipping an ancient demon lord and the true nature of the Scissor Man. She also uncovers her own mysterious origins and connections to the supernatural forces that are at play. Once again, the game emphasises panic pursuit over combat. Jennifer is defenceless and must hide, run and solve environmental puzzles while being relentlessly stalked. Her fate depends on player choices throughout, leading to multiple endings, ranging from tragic deaths to bittersweet survival. The story blends slasher horror with occult mythology, creating an atmosphere where Jennifer must not only confront the physical killer, but generational evil of her own traumatic past. With the blend of point and click exploration and real-time panic sequences, the player now experiences all of these interactive elements in full 3D, moving away from the originality of the first game, but still manages to capitalise on the slow, methodical and deeply unnerving nature that the series is familiar with. But like its original predecessor, it is also another point and click nightmare of helplessness and paranoia that helped define the PS1 era of Japanese horror storytelling.
Excuse me?
Twilight Syndrome Kyuumei would be the sequel to the events of the original game, with some unique elements where your decisions that carry over from the previous game and the consequences that lie within, which are chilling and unpredictable, following on the events of the high school girls investigating urban and school legends, where you'll have to follow the events of ghost stories and narratives, trying to uncover the elements of spirits that have passed or died in accidents, which will see the plot unfold across various locations, from forests, dark woods and even into the mountains. Very like the first game, it uses point and click style elements, but in a side-scrolling manner, where you'll also have to solve puzzles and interact with other characters in order to figure out the game's narrative. And very like the original game in the series, this too has also influenced how other games would be made from that point on. And during this time on the PlayStation, this particular series was recognised heavily for its unique blend of horror and adventure elements, and is one of the best examples of point and click horror games that was seen for that time. RMJ The Mystery Hospital is a first-person point-and-click horror-style game for the PlayStation that released in 1997, where you play as a group of young survivors that try to navigate a hospital after an accident, solving puzzles and uncovering a sinister plot. The game features full-motion video and minimal gameplay, focusing more on its narrative and quirky design. The survivors of the game have to explore the facility, looking for ways to escape, which is filled with secrets, conspiracies and supernatural occurrences that you must uncover to understand the mystery behind the accident and the sinister events that are occurring, where you'll encounter other various characters, from a nurse to a mysterious girl, as they attempt to escape. The interactive movies and the point-and-click gameplay, featuring full-motion video FMV sequences and voice acting that focus more on the narrative and quirky design, with some unusual design elements that are quite graphic. As the impending feeling of isolation and claustrophobia set in, it only amplifies the tension. There are elements within the story, especially later on, that does get very graphic in terms of its violence, so you'll need to prepare yourself for what's coming next. It's a very obscure title like many of the games on this list, but it's also among the most atmospheric, and for those reasons alone, it is another worthwhile try.
RMJ? ここも閉まってる。やだな。
急ごうぜ。
急ぎましょう。
Part cyberpunk and part metaphysical nightmare, Kowloon's Gate is one of the PlayStation's most ambitious and obscure titles for its time. Set in a surreal recreation of Hong Kong's Kowloon walled city, you explore labyrinthian streets where the living and dead coexist. The game originally released in 1997 as an adventure game, but it does have horror elements, using a point-and-click style format, where the player acts as a practitioner, tasked with restoring balance between the realms of the yin and yang after the city mysteriously reappears. You will have to navigate through the walled city of Kowloon, solving puzzles and gathering items, while manipulating elements to defeat restless spirits. The core emphasis of the gameplay is to correct spiritual disturbances and imbalances, where you'll find yourself inside of many claustrophobic settings with very dark and atmospheric visuals, chanting soundtracks and eerie dialogue that will make for an unforgettable and dark experience. While initial sales of the game back in the day were quite poor, it has gained a very dedicated fan base over the years. It is definitely a chilling and atmospheric experience that was worth adding to this list. DeathMask, otherwise known as Angel Devoid, Face of the Enemy, is a tech-noir, graphic, adventure-style point-and-click horror game that is grim, methodical and drenched in atmosphere, but it's very rare and unknown to many. Essentially, it's a first-person point-and-click adventure, where you take on the role of a detective who wakes up after an accident, but having the face of a notorious criminal implanted on his face, and he must navigate a dangerous cyberpunk world while evading threats and uncovering a unique and individual story. With it being a point-and-click adventure, you are also subjected to various different events like quick time events, where you have to make quick and random choices before consequences will take place, and every decision will have some form of consequence or action tied to it. And you'll notice this as you navigate throughout the Neo City, facing threats from bounty hunters and hostile characters. You'll have to interact with other characters, solve puzzles, and follow the game's narrative to uncover the truth about the character's identity and confronting his own past. Everything is pretty much played from an FMV style format, as every interaction plays out a cutscene that will draw out even further the plot of the story, but it's very dark and atmospheric in its setting, that almost has kind of like a Blade Runner style vibe to it, which is very interesting. The game also did get a release on the Sega Saturn in Japan, but even as of today, it is relatively unknown by many. A very dark and atmospheric experience, that if you enjoy these point and click style adventures, this is one of the rarest games you can find out there.
誰かと思えば賞金首様か。気をつけなあんた。はあはあはあはあはあ。
ご遠慮ください。
ジェギーちゃん、見覚え殺しであんたに逮捕されたエリートよ。あんたが顔を変えてから変なものしてるってエンジェルちゃんが教えてくれたの。さあ、あんたが仕返しするわよ。冷たく冷やしてケーキアイスにしてあげるわよ。覚悟はいい？
Twilight Syndrome Saikai would be the final entry in the iconic series on the PlayStation that would feature more mature themes but improved visuals, which also explores the passage of time, loss, and the lingering trauma of youth wrapped in a supernatural mystery, while also featuring a very unique blend of horror and adventure, once again focusing on a group of high school students investigating paranormal activities and events. This particular sequel, however, would introduce the gameplay into the 3D polygonal realm that would shift away from the title's 2D characteristics in previous entries, with the aim to enhance the horror experience and atmosphere. And the plot, very similar to the original entries, sees you exploring rumours about spirits in their high school, leading to encounters with real ghosts, combining exploration and narrative-driven experiences. The game was well received, being notable and praised for its atmosphere and engaging storytelling that also dived into Japan's urban folklore and legends, bringing to light stories that were once faded into obscurity. But again, like its previous entries, this too was also seen as one of the best point-and-click horror games for its time on the PlayStation. And for a time you would only see these games in Japan, because in other regions point-and-click horror wasn't really as well received. It wouldn't be until years later that people would start to witness and experience and even respect and appreciate these type of narrative-driven games. Juggernaut is often seen as one of the most bizarre and unusual experimental games that released in Japan for the PlayStation, which acts as a first-person point-and-click adventure that provides a radically different approach from every other game that was seen around that time. Instead of zombies or monsters, you're literally exploring an architecture of a possessed woman's mind, where the character's consciousness has become somewhat of a twisted mansion, where rooms don't make logical sense because they're not supposed to. You're navigating trauma, memories and demonic corruption given a physical form, but through surreal, disturbing environments you can manage to piece together fragments of our consciousness. It's slow, psychological and dripping with occult symbolism. It's a very slow psychological and atmospheric experience, and a mental landscape where prison suddenly bleeds into different types of environments, anything from a prison island to a prehistoric jungle, cyberspace zones and even ancient forests. And all of these areas that you'll explore, with all of the puzzles in mind, present a very deeply unsettling and psychological repression style experience that even with every puzzle you solve, leaves a very unnerving feeling. Essentially you could say you're not just exploring someone's mind, you're changing the shape within it. The scenarios you'll find yourself in base itself somewhat as a fractured dream, where each area is split into different hubs with different scenarios that feel less like levels but more like colliding fever dreams, with each transition feeling jarring and disorientating. But Juggernaut really allows you to dive into the psyche of the individual rather than just provide cheap thrills. The game really dives into what it's like to witness a deteriorating psyche, where every wrong turn could mean life or death. Critics at the time noticed that while the game was unusual, it wasn't essentially groundbreaking, but it did offer a very unique and atmospheric and very dark experience that really did mix engaging story and puzzle selection. But anyone that's played it, they will have seen it as probably one of the most experimental and unusual games ever released on the PlayStation, which it is. And when we look back at it over time, this is precisely the kind of experimental, atmospheric-driven experience that defined the PS1 era of Japanese horror games. While games like Silent Hill and Resident Evil became legends, dozens of weird, ambitious titles like Juggernaut would slip through the cracks. And for horror game enthusiasts and preservationists seeking these overlooked gems that pushed boundaries and took creative risks, this particular game represents exactly what made late 90s Japanese game development so special, as developers were willing to make something genuinely strange rather than safely marketable. And Juggernaut feels like Silent Hill if it were built as a haunted gallery of the subconscious. In many ways it's a masterpiece of atmosphere that few outside of Japan have ever experienced. And because of these qualities, it could also be considered a time capsule of the PlayStation 1's experimental horror era that deserves to be remembered. Confusingly titled Clock Tower 2 in Japan, released as Clock Tower: The Struggle within other regions. This next entry in the series expanded the formula with psychological themes. You play as Alyssa Hale, a young high school student that on the surface is a seemingly ordinary teenage girl, but with a terrifying secret, as she suffers from a dissociative identity disorder and shares her body with a violent alternate personality named Bates. When Alyssa goes to visit her family, she becomes entangled in a nightmarish conspiracy involving sinister experiments, dark supernatural legacy with ancient rituals and demonic entities, also with mass murder plots and occult conspiracies. And she is literally the front and centre of the whole ordeal. Very like the original games in the series, it is also very graphic in its detail with its violent nature, where you have to run, hide, solve puzzles in order to proceed, but you can't really fight back as such. You just have to use your wits in order to take advantage of the environments to escape danger. What makes this entry experimental is due to the personality mechanic. Alyssa can involuntarily switch to Bates during moments of extreme stress or fear, and when Bates takes control, the game's tone shifts dramatically. Bates is sadistic, violent, and sees the world differently than the terrified Alyssa. Players must manage Alyssa's fear and stress levels while solving puzzles, evading stalkers, and uncovering which personality will ultimately survive. The story explores themes of mental illness, identity fragmentation, and whether Bates is truly a separate entity or something else entirely, possibly connected to the supernatural forces that are seen within. On the gameplay front, it features branching paths and numerous endings based on the player choices and which personality dominates. ranging from Alessa's salvation to complete psychological annihilation. It is often seen as one of the most controversial and overlooked PS1 horror experiments that managed to blur the line between mental illness and supernatural possession. This helped to make the mechanics of the game unpredictable, and its disjointed narrative only added to the dreamlike unease. It may not be the most refined entry in the series, but the tension and twisted atmosphere make it one of the PS1's most underappreciated horror experiences.
Oh, the line's dead. What is that? What? How? It's only an arm? No! Oh no! Ashley! My amulet? No! Stop!
Don't be afraid, Alyssa.
Yuuyami Doori Tankentai would be another point-and-click horror-style adventure game from the creators of the Twilight Syndrome series that would take a lot of inspiration from these classic titles, which again would see you follow the role of 3 young junior high school students as they explore urban legends and mythical stories within their neighbourhood across a vast fictional city, which will see you exploring very vast, typical Japanese environments for their time, with various locations like shopping districts and parks and even dark forests. But you will be accompanied by a dog that will also help you to solve puzzles and can bring light and awareness to threats and even ghastly creatures that lie within, as the dog will be able to sense things that you can't see yourself. Everything around this game focuses on uncovering paranormal events, with the main emphasis being on exploration and decision making, as that will affect the story, very like the Twilight Syndrome series. And very like those original games, this too was also well praised upon its release, being seen as one of the scariest and most atmospheric point-and-click horror games for its time, but it's also one of the rarest to find if you're a collector. But if you can get your hands on it or play it through emulation, you owe it to yourself to play this unique experience. Baroque Syndrome was a very rare and yet unusual title, as it was created as a visual novel style prequel to the original Baroque game, exclusive to Japan, which is set in a desolate, decaying world filled with religious imagery and psychological torment. The game's tone is pure existential dread. Instead of cheap scares, Baroque Syndrome overwhelms the player with philosophical horror, a mediation on guilt, sin and redemption. This entry in the series would serve as an actual prequel, before the events of the original game, featuring a different gameplay storyline and style, which is set before the events of the post-apocalyptic world in which you inhabited, with the main emphasis focusing on storytelling, where players engage in dialogue and making choices that affect different outcomes, with the graphics and presentation differing vastly from the original game, but offering a more unique aesthetic experience, as each choice has a consequence. But this title in the series is often considered a spin-off than a direct sequel, as it also explores different aspects of the Baroque universe. But what it may lack in gameplay, it definitely makes up for a narrative and atmosphere, and for those reasons alone, it makes it a must try, as it is also quite rare. Before Fatal Frame made photography horror famous, Kowai Shashin provided players with haunted photographs. This title acts as a horror action game for the PlayStation that released only in Japan, taking on the role of a character with psychic abilities who exorcises evil spirits from haunted photographs using quick time events and cursor movements. This point and click mystery revolves around cursed photos that capture relentless spirits, and each investigation unravels ghost stories steeped in Japanese folklore, quiet, tragic and deeply unsettling. So the emphasis of the gameplay is that it involves moving the cursor over the photographs to identify spirits, and players must complete quick time events to exorcise these spirits so that they can pass on. Even though it's more of a static and slow paced affair, it is noted for its atmospheric and eerie setting, enhanced by the digitized photos that include ghostly images. And it did have somewhat of a cultural impact, as it brought to light a lot of elements around urban legends, including rumours about the authenticity of the ghost pictures or photos used in the game, and alleged curses associated with its production. It is less about jump scares but more about emotional hauntings that linger after you have played the game, but it is also one of the very rarest of experiences that you can find that was released in Japan for the PlayStation. These point and click horror games represent something we nearly lost: intimate horror, the kind that whispers rather than screams. They were products of a time when developers had to use creativity, not hardware, to terrify us. And each of these titles tells a unique story, not just on screen, but about the evolution of Japanese horror itself. So the next time someone says the PS1 era was just polygons and tank controls, make sure you remind them of these games. They may be rare, untranslated and buried in time, but thanks to fans, emulation and preservation efforts, they can be still experienced today. And as for which one is scariest, maybe it's not about which game made you jump, but which one still lingers in your mind long after the console has been turned off. Which also begs the question as to what your experiences were with these games. Did you know anything about them? Did you know that they existed at all? And if so, what are your overall thoughts of them if you have experienced them? So be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you would like to see more content around even more of Japan's lost horror games that released on the PlayStation, then it might be worth checking out this next video. And as always, keep those gaming memories alive.